Assalamualaikum everyone, this is Talal Hussain. Now this is going to be a long video, but this is going to be a very important one because in this video I am going to break down the entire reading and writing section of the digital SAT for you, right? I'll be telling you the percentage of questions that we have, for every section in the test, right? And what are the topics that we have and how they test the different skills that every student, has to develop, for scoring on the digital SAT, right? So let's start. So the first section that we should talk about, which is the longest section as well, is craft and structure, right? So if I talk about the percentage, in terms of percentage, this section is about 28% of the entire reading and writing section, right? Now 28% means that you can expect 16 to 17 questions from craft and structure in your entire paper, right? I'm talking about from both the modules. That means from 54 questions, you can expect 16 to 17 questions or maybe 18 questions from craft and structure, right? Now, this craft and structure can be further divided into three sections, right? The first section is words in context. The second section is overall purpose and structure. And the third section is cross-text connections, right? Now, as I mentioned, the first section is words in context, right? Now, words in context will, test your ability to find out the meaning of a word in the particular context, right? So guys, if you want to solve these questions, you need to have a very good vocabulary. And out of the 16-17 questions that I mentioned of the entire craft and structure, you can assume that you will have 40 to 50% of the questions from words in context, right? So it's going to be a large proportions, right? So you can expect 7 to 8 questions from words in context, right? The other section that I told you was overall purpose and structure, right? So you will have questions that will ask you the reason for why the passage has been written and the structure of the passage, right? That means the order in which the content has been written, right? And what the content is, right? That is what these two questions might ask you, right? Then the third section is cross-text connections, right? Now, cross-text connections questions will give you a couple of passages, right? You'd have to read those two passages, and this happens only in cross-text connections. It does not happen in any of the other section of the digital SAT that you get more than one passage for one question, right? So you'll get two passages. You'd have to read those two passages, and you'd have to, take out the point of view of both those passages and do as per the question, right? Now, in totality, if I talk about craft and structure, it's more about the analysis, right? Now, this section will ask you to go one step ahead, analyze the information, find out the whys, find out the hows, and then answer the question, right? Now, this may be one of the most challenging sections of the paper, and this is the first section that you'll encounter on the digital SAT, right? Now, moving on. The second section that we have is called information and ideas, right? Now, this information and ideas, if I talk about percentage wise, this includes almost 26% of the total paper. Now guys, what that means is that you will have around 15 to 16 questions from information and ideas. Now that again is a large proportion, right? Now this information and ideas is further divided into 4 parts, right? I'll tell you what those 4 are and then I explain, right? So the first one is called command of evidence textual. The second one is called command of evidence quantitative. The third one is called central idea and details. And the fourth one is called inferences, right? Now, command of evidence, both the types of command of evidence will ask you pretty much the same thing, right? They'll ask you to find an option, right, that is, the nearest to the claim made by the author in the passage. Only difference is when you talk about command of evidence textual, it will only pertain to, a passage. But when you talk about command of evidence quantitative, you'll have a passage, but with that you'll have a graph as well, right? A graph, maybe a bar chart or a pie chart or any line graph, right? Or, some table or any, information that is given in numbers, right? So you would have to translate that information into, words and make sure that, it matches with the, claim that is there in the passage and then take on with your answer, right? So again, it is the processing of information. The third part that we have is central idea and details, right? It's simple, like other passages that you may have done in your O-levels or any other class or in your high schools, right? Passages that ask you for the primary purpose or the central idea of, of that entire passage, it will be, asking you the same thing, right? And details question will ask you about any particular detail in that very passage. So that is going to be relatively easier, right? The inference questions, however, will test your ability to see whether you can go one step ahead or not. So they'll have a premises in your passage, and based on that premises they will ask you to find out a conclusion in your option answers, right? So all in all, again, if I talk about overall information and ideas, it works about processing of information, right? So it wants to check, right? The information and ideas section will test your ability to process the information and do exactly as per the question is asking you, right? So questions are very important. So this is going to be 26%, and it will follow craft and structure. So it is going to be very interesting if you have a good reading habit, if you know how to classify those passages into what the questions are asking. If you can do that, this is going to be very easy, and it's going to be very interesting for you as well, right? So these are the two sections that were related to reading as well. Now if you come to the third part or the third section of the reading and writing section, it's called standard English conventions, right? Now as the name suggests, it talks about the conventions of English language, right? So it talks about the grammar, it talks about the linguistics, and it talks about the different rules that we have in English language. It is further divided into form, sense and structure and boundaries, right? So form, sense and structure will deal with all the grammatical concepts such as subject verb agreement, pronouns, tenses, verb forms, modifiers and all of those concepts. Whereas boundaries is concerned with different ways you can join two particular type of sentences, right? And obviously when you go into the detail, you'll understand how it works, right? And if you talk about percentage wise, it's the same as information and ideas, right? So standard English conventions will have 26%. You'll have 26% of your questions from standard English convention. So that is a large proportion, right? And standard English convention is a part that you can get a perfect score easily. I normally tell my students to start their papers with standard English conventions, go on with the rules perfectly of the standard English conventions, and try their best to get a perfect score on it. And you can do these questions earlier as well, right? So if you have, for example, 1 minute for a question, you can try. If you try, you can do these questions in 30 seconds as well. And for every 30 seconds that you solve on every question of standard English convention, you can utilize those 30 seconds in the harder craft and structure and the information and ideas question, right? So that is how it works. Again, 26%, meaning that you'll have around 15 to 17 questions from a standard English conventions as well, right? Now lastly, we have expression of ideas. Now that is also connected with the writing part, right? Expression of ideas, if I talk about percentage wise, it has 20% of the total paper. It will have around 12 to 13 questions. It is further divided again into two parts, right? The first one is transitions and the second one is rhetorical synthesis, right? Now transition is your ability to see how you should join two sentences, right? So if the first sentence is the opposite of the second sentence, right, you should know that you cannot use moreover over here. You have to use however over here, right? So that is how it goes about. And rhetorical synthesis is a new type of question that was never there on the SAT. You're given a set of information and you have to solve your questions as per the question asks you using that set of information, right? So it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be a little bit challenging as well, but it's going to be very interesting if you understand the approach to solve all of these questions, right? What I have done for you today is I have broken down the entire reading and writing section for you. In our upcoming videos, we'll be talking about these particular subsets or the sections of the reading and writing sections that I have talked about in detail individually. Hopefully this video will help you and this will give you an idea of what the entire reading and writing section of the digital SAT looks like. Thank you so much.